why don't we go around the table? And since Ron hasn't properly met us, so I'm Pete Soper. Worked for a long time doing OS, datacom, compiler, tool chain type software, and Java runtime and some Java architecture stuff. And then made my own little business in 2015 to make prototypes for people. And I'm temporarily 100% retired at the moment.
Temporarily?
Yeah, I've got some medical things going on, and serious things, and I am possibly going to be out of the picture mid to late October range for possibly a few months. It just depends on how I react to some therapy. So I parked the business, and I've been doing everything I can to make myself extraneous with this project. So that's all for me. I see Paul next.
Okay. Paul Mcdougall, retired NVIDIA architect, PhD in computer graphics, many years of C++ programming, writing simulations of next generation hardware. I also do a lot of maker stuff. Pete and I are kind of the founders of TriEmbed. So I'm retired. I'm taking classes at Durham Tech in welding and machining, just for fun. And for Quercus here, I'm doing the Windows installation script. Nick, you're next.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I generally tell people I'm too stupid to know that I can't do something. I was VP of Engineering of Leap Systems, which is credited with inventing virtual reality. I've done a whole bunch of research at UMass into plant physiology and the optical effects on plants. I was senior Linux cluster architect at IBM for a number of years. I worked for and then founded a company that made quantum confined semiconductors. I was a choreographer.
Social worker?
Yeah, social worker. I've done a whole bunch of shit. And the only thing I've come up with is a fearless. It's I don't have much fear of failing. I was a television director for a while. Have PBS credits to my name. I've worked out in Los Angeles and New York on some reasonably large live television shoots. I don't know what else I've done. But anyway, I'm my current interests are doing some work on plant physiology, and don't have the equipment to go back and do the quantum confined regions, but would like to. I'll get into NC State into their lab, and I have a patent on a process for making quantum confined material using cryogenics and high voltage, which I have no business knowing how to do, but it was fun to make sparks under liquid nitrogen. So that's some of the stuff that I've done. Spent time at the MIT AI lab, bunch of stuff in computer graphics, hardware and software. What else have I done? That's sort of, a little bit of what I've done.
And he created Quercus.
Well, with some help.
Well, no, you actually launched a full-blown conspiracy to cause TriEmbed to branch out.
I think we have that meeting recorded in one of the regular TriEmbed meetings last October, November.
I'm to blame for all of this. Damn you all.
It's on tape. You can't deny it.
I can. It's you know, I'm Amber Heard. I'm Johnny Depp. I can deny everything.
And no, you didn't take the papers, right?
Yeah, well, it's but yeah, you know, I sort of, you know, agent provocateur would be a good term for me. So that's who I am.
Dawn, you want to go next?
Your mic is muted, Dawn. Okay, well,
She may have stepped away for a minute.
Yeah, must have. So Ron's next.
Okay, Ron Craig. I've worked in software for around 30 years or so, I guess now. Interesting things I've done. Let's see, nothing really. Been at IBM for about 27 years. I wrote some of the software that was used to monitor Space Shuttle Columbia prior to launch. Some AI stuff to watch to see if things were going haywire or not. I was in the tech shop, so done some of what Paul's talking about with all the maker skills and welding and so on. I do Arduino and Raspberry Pi stuff, make my own electronics for the ham radio and that kind of jazz. And for this project, I'm just here to be your token. Yeah, he knows electronics, but he doesn't know FPGAs. Walk through this blindly, stupidly, and document the journey so that other makers can follow in the path without.
You're here to bring order to our chaos.
Well, possibly, and we're walking a fine line with that, as people, as we'll explain later. I think want to make sure that I bring the proper amount of order. We want it to still remain fun. As I said, I'm from IBM, and you guys have experience with IBM as well, and that can suck all the fun out of anything. So we want to, walk that line and not make it so restrictive that everybody looks at it and goes, "This is dull," and wanders on off again, without becoming entirely too whimsical too. Maybe, I don't know, but you guys decide that, and I'll follow your lead.
Jamie.
So nothing as impressive as you all, scholars, but honored to be here and to soak up as much information as possible. I'm new to tech. I got interested in programming a few years ago, so I dabbled in some Ruby and some Python. During pandemic, I was part of the first IBM quantum computing cohort. It was an 8-month course. And that really fueled my interest in quantum. And then I had a job with a company called Spark Robotic, where I was assembling CNC routers, and then got some experience in the wiring room, and then got the opportunity to work with my mentor now, who's an electrical engineer. So I learned some C with him, and acid etched a PCB and connected a LED grid and programmed that. And now, continuing my interest, I just enrolled with Wake Tech in their embedded systems certificate program. So I'm currently taking C with Arduino and the digital electronics course, learning a lot of foundational skills already. And then the dream job is to program peripheral devices for quantum computers. I got that random idea from a mentorship with an engineer with IonQ, and that's exactly what she does. So excited to learn more about the FPGAs.
Great. Carl?
You guys are going into depth here. So geez, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I started putting together Heathkit radios. That was like the beginning of my electronics life. Took a special electronics course in high school, which I don't think they have it. This was on Long Island. I don't think they have it anymore. Worked in electronics for a while, but I found it actually, at least on Long Island at the time, it was very, very difficult to find work in the field. So I kind of started slowly switching over to software engineering. So by the time I was in my late 20s, I'm not even in my late 70s yet. So by the time I was in my late 20s, I had pretty much kind of flipped over and started doing mostly software. So I've been doing software now for like 45 years, a little less. Before that, I used to do authorized service for these guys.
Had one of those.
So, yep, this is Atari service. So I was an authorized service center for them up and through they used to have their machine called, they had the Atari 400, which was like a chiclet keyboard. And then they went to the 600 and 800, which kind of had a regular keyboard, but I think didn't have much more than 64K. And then they went to the Atari ST, which was their own operating system and whatnot. So I did authorized service for them. And then I also started to do it for Commodore. Fixed a lot of Commodore 64s. And so I was pretty much doing that through most of my 20s before I got into software. And then, so yeah, I was also fixing guitar amplifiers and power systems, huge PA systems for like concerts and universities and stuff like that. At the time, I worked at radio stations. I designed one of their production control room, built all the equipment, designed a little digital circuit that would automatically read information coming out of NPR so we could actually switch on and off certain news content and other shows when we wanted. This is an old technology that they had. It worked through a small computer and this electronic circuit I wrote, which is a bunch of AND and NAND gates, I guess, if I can remember right, that converted their signals into something the computer could understand. So yeah, I've done all sorts of stuff like that. And at that time, I was also learning C and whatnot. So in recent years, I've worked for a couple of different companies, Scripps Publishing, mostly web services and website related stuff. Before that was a company called Applied Theory, Navisite, they became eventually. Worked for Cisco a couple of times. I worked for NetApp once. Geez, I've been like all over the place. Those last three positions were here in Raleigh or in the area. So that's kind of what I've done for Quercus right now. I'm kind of helping out doing some of the Linux install it stuff. I'm writing some code to read a config file, which it also lets you actually create the config file. So if it finds there isn't one available, it'll start asking you questions for what you want. And you can type in what what you want. I think there's 5 or 6 things in the config, and then it saves it. And from then on, it'll just read the config. You can override it with a different config, so you can have multiple setups. And you can also tell it to redo the config if you want, but it'll always do it in the default one, which will either be in your personal home directory or in the base directory of Quercus. And I put a .git ignore in there to ignore that config file and a bunch of other stuff. That's actually in Quercus already, I think, in main. So that's kind of what I've done and what I'm doing.
It's Rob.
Hi. You know, there are groups where I'm the one who's done a little bit of everything, but in this group, that's just a silly thing to say.
Yeah, we've all done that.
Right. It's just a silly thing to say. So more recently, I guess, I mean, I have a background as a ham radio operator. I used to teach foreign languages. I ran a sail windsurfing school, things. But more recently, I put in about 20 years in telecom with Cisco. I'm doing mobile, wireless, embedded switching and routing solutions for data on mobile. I left that and spent several years full-time volunteering to help get the Forge initiative a little farther along than it was. So I'm heavily involved in the Forge initiative, and some people in this group will know some about that, either because they participate or because we've met there. It's a local nonprofit that does exploring science and technology. Not exactly a makerspace, not exactly not a makerspace. Currently, I write software for CNC machines, and I have experience making circuits, designing circuits, but not at a professional level. I needed to knock out a printed circuit board recently and did. You notice it's got a Pico right there. That was kind of fun. I got to write microcode for the first time in probably 8 years. I mean, it's just assembler, but it's without a stack. I think that kind of describes me. I'm kind of interested in this FPGA stuff. I was really active for a little while there and meant to keep that way, but between work and the stuff going on with the Forge right now to make sure we get through all the things that are going on, I've just been really, really busy. So I feel like I've dropped some balls, and I hope I can pick some back up soon. Anyway, I guess that's me.
What languages did you teach?
Well, that's kind of a funny story. I had just come back from school in France, and I was really young, and my mom gave me a little classified out of the newspaper. You remember those little tiny things that said you get a job?
Yeah, they used to be very common.
And it said, French teacher wanted, and she said, well, you speak French, you should try for it. So I dialed the number. Some woman out in Winston-Salem picked up, and I had just gotten back from France. So when she picked up in French, I just talked with her, and we spent an hour talking on the phone. She interviewed me for the job in French. It never occurred to me that was funny because I was in North Carolina. And at the end, she said, well, I want to hire you to be an immersion teacher. You need to show up for training. I've got someone who will be in Raleigh, in a week and a half, and you need to show up for it, and you're going to teach 40 hours a week of immersive French. I'm like, cool. I reported to this woman over the phone for 3 months. And she finally got into our office because someone else actually ran the local office. She was French. That's her national origin. And she got in and she's going through the paperwork and she's looking through all the forms you fill out, which ask you a lot of personal questions. And she's like, Rob, your mom's from New Jersey. Where did you learn French? And I see, your dad's from Quebec. And I said, well, yeah, he was Scottish descent, never learned a word of French. I learned French when I went to college in France. Say, oh, well, you're not a native speaker. You can't teach French anymore. You'll have to teach English. So I taught French for a very short while, like 3 months, and then I taught English. And because I had 2 languages that I had experience teaching, when they needed someone to take over the pedagogical role of teaching teachers to teach, I ended up in that role, and then eventually actually running language schools. I ended up running a language school up in DC, one of the sort of the second largest one in the country. That was kind of very exciting and almost too exciting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what I taught. I've learned a couple others since then, but that's what I taught.
The reason I asked is I lived in Brazil for 4 years, like 25 years ago. And I used to teach EFL, English as a foreign language. I also taught ESL here.
Right.
But, so yeah, they usually want native speakers, but I'm surprised she couldn't figure that out.
Well, I just come from France, and my French was very good, apparently. Right. I mean, and I worked for Alcatel a couple of years after that, and they'd regularly mistake me for French. Nobody would do that today. This is 30 years later. Nobody would mistake me for French today. I don't even know what the right word for mobile phone is. You know, there were no mobile phones when I learned French.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so yeah, I also speak Portuguese, and because my wife is Chinese, I speak some Mandarin. So.
Right. Very accomplished. That's very cool. Anyway, so everybody knows more than they ever wanted to know about Rob now.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is an introduction to the user group. And I think I'd like to...
Unless Dawn is here, maybe she's...
Oh, yeah. You know what? Very relevantly, I was about to turn things over to Dawn, but Dawn, are you there? Hello, Dawn?
Microphone's off.
Your microphone is off, Dawn.
There you go.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I had to step away from one.
Okay. I was just going to suggest that maybe you should start talking about the user group and your vision of it, since you this was your idea, and then I think you got some slides and
sure.
So on.
Well, I don't think that there's anything, it's not a unique vision for a user group. Basically, since we now have something to install and something to use, to go ahead and start using it. And one is so that we can all get to the point where we can make projects, but another is to create some documentation along the way for others who would just be starting out, and then to give feedback to the project as well. So probably, all right, let me put this up on my screen. Okay, can you see this diagram?
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So this is probably my greatest accomplishment of the past couple of weeks, is actually figuring out, in my mind, getting everything straight of how all of the different components of Quercus work and fit together. And so I thought that I would share this at a user group meeting. We don't have any new folks, and so I don't know if this is really a revelation to anyone else, but I was thinking that it could be used as introductory material for other people as they hopefully join the group in the future. So I don't know if I have a lot to say about this. I guess I'd be interested if I ran this by Pete. And does this match with everybody's conception of what the project is? Any feedback?
I think for Ron's benefit, you could just go through it, and also the people that watch the YouTube video.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. I forgot about that. All right. So this is, in a nutshell, how to do project design. A project based on with an FPGA at the core, using Quercus. And so the first, can you see my mouse, by the way?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the first step is to actually use this drag and drop tool from GreenPack, which I should mention has just been acquired by Renesas and is now called the Forge, or is going to be called the Forge. That's what this little asterisk is for. And so, but currently they still have things listed on their website as GreenPack. So that's what I'm going with here. Anyway, their software tool is drag and drop of components that you would want the FPGA to simulate. And so you create that, it puts out a file, and then this is picked up by the aardvark tool, which Nick created. I don't know, Pete, do you get credits here too for aardvark?
No, I figured out how to edit one of the files.
Okay.
Credit or blame is the other side.
Okay, so this is a tool that is unique to the Quercus project. And so this web interface then takes the output of the FPGA code or the designer, and then wirelessly uploads it to the project board, and in particular to the ESP32, and then it downloads the information onto the FPGA or communicates it. I don't know if that's upload or download technically, but anyway. And so aardvark is communicating wirelessly with the ESP32. And the firmware that is also a Project Quercus creation, referred to as the ANT, resides on the ESP32. Anything anyone wants to add to that?
This is Ron. So just to make sure I understand, so the ESP32 then is picking up what's going to be the firmware that'll put on the FPGA, and at power up, it's going to shoot it over there, trigger the FPGA to start doing its thing. And I suppose the FPGA then is used by any other software that may be on the ESP32 to do whatever it is it's wanting to do.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
yeah. Basically, I've moved things slightly further along than that, but yeah, it was designed as a two things. One is a teaching tool, so that the young'uns and others could start playing with an FPGA and start playing. The idea was to put together a low-level oscilloscope so you could look at waveforms and generally kind of fool around with things. And the other is that I had a number of projects that I wanted something like this to do, where I could communicate in a very uniform way with the ESP and have it communicate with other devices. So I have been developing the architecture to be able to do that.
Thank you.
One detail, rather than firmware, what gets put into the FPGA is effectively 2048 bits. And the 2048 bits specify the interconnections between the different pieces, functional units of the FPGA.
Yeah, that's the A in FPGA, I assume.
And it is most
yes.
Most FPGAs are purely digital devices you can set up to do. The advantage of the dialogue line is these are analog chips or have analog components, so you can actually get them to toggle things and do something. And as I spent a bunch of my life as an analog engineer, and I kind of like analog stuff. So, you know, there's nothing per se that you couldn't. In fact, Dialog has some purely digital devices, but I don't want analog to be a dying art. That would make me a dinosaur. So I'm trying to revive it.
So I would say that file is the P in FPGA. It's the programmability. It's the configuring of the
A
of the device. Yeah.
Yeah. And one other little detail, it also has lots of digital blocks as well as the analog blocks.
The only comment, which is not directly related to the process, is if you're going to make this part of a something that people will be looking at, your number 4 is a lighter is like gray instead of black like the rest of them. Is there a reason for that, or?
I can't even see number 4.
So it's one on the top.
Yeah. It was so
4
I couldn't read it. Yeah.
is very light, and then okay. So yeah, I was just wondering if.
Yeah, but you know why that's gray?
TBD.
It's TBD.
But
So maybe
so you can't see it on my screen. It's slightly lighter, but so maybe I should come up with a different way to indicate that.
Yeah. So what
I would just use a color or something for more contrast.
Okay.
Oh, so is this like on different screens that different ones get lit up?
What?
No, I don't think it's animated. I just think they wanted to indicate that portion there, that function listed under number 4, is still to be designed.
Oh, okay.
So it's ghosty because it's not quite there yet.
Yeah, okay.
So I think this would be a wonderful thing, Dawn, to have as part of something linked from our README, if not at the top of the README, because we do need some visuals in there. And I know I think I can even make them so that they'll be clickable. So if you want to get more information on the green pack, you can click on that screen and go off to read the document for that, and so on and so forth. Send us to different parts of the documentation, just as an added feature.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
Okay, so just so you all, not everybody can actually make this writing out right here. It's too light on some screens.
Well, I can read it. I was just wondering why it was lighter in general. That's all.
I just had to move closer.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a problem reading it. I was just
okay. And yes, it is because it's not yet implemented, whereas everything else exists currently.
That I didn't get that point, I guess.
Okay, maybe I should put that in there directly.
Yeah, you can move that TBD up front.
Yeah, I didn't understand it either.
Okay.
Oh, TBD, to be determined. Okay, now I get it. But that went over my head until you said it.
Okay, and so if there's no more comment on this, I have one more slide. Let's see if I can bring that up. So this is a point that Pete brought up, is folks who might be interested in diving in and programming FPGAs currently, or who have done it recently, would need to use a serial debugger. And so this is a comparison of what Quercus can and intends to provide in the future versus the current, the status quo. And so this is a picture of the serial debugger and specs, if anybody wants to track one down. And so what it does is uploads the code, the FPGA code, from the GoConfigure software to the FPGA using the a USB port. I guess that part's technically out here. And so by contrast, currently, if I understand things correctly, the only place that the USB port really comes into play with Quercus project is in the initial firmware installation on the ESP32, ANT being the firmware. And so from that point on, the uploading of the FPGA code is handled by aardvark, and that's running in a web browser. And then that is transferred wirelessly, that being the FPGA code, to the ESP32. And then the ANT firmware actually does the programming of the FPGA. And so as Pete's wording, I guess, was that we're essentially creating an application platform with future, in particular with future features. And so here again, right up front, I'll make this clear. I didn't use shading, but so the double asterisks next to a feature indicate that it's in the works someplace to some degree. And so, but the wireless programming of the FPGA using an aardvark currently exists, and people can currently use that. And these are a few other features that are in the works to some degree. And Pete and Nick are going to talk about some of these in an update in a minute. But so I think Ron, you mentioned potentially using code alongside of the FPGA, and that's something that's in the works. And then transmitting some of your data back to aardvark, which can send it elsewhere, and potentially over-the-air updates of the ANT firmware once it is installed on the ESP32. And I don't know if this is necessarily a feature, but something that can be taken advantage of is that the aardvark can communicate with multiple FPGAs.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the serial debugger wasn't used so much for debugging as it was used for programming FPGAs. And the problem is that those devices are expensive and right now rare. And instead, we've got a different way of doing it that's a lot more friendly.
The serial debugger is designed to load code onto the FPGA, does a fine job of that, but it doesn't let you do anything with it.
Right.
It is the idea here is that if you want to monitor temperature or you can program the FPGA to be a temperature device and then send just the temperature data to whatever you want to, or set up whatever alarms you want to. It gives you an application platform rather than a programming platform.
Got it.
Okay, so that's really, well, that's all I had as far as slides are concerned. I guess there's, let's see. I'm looking through the agenda. So I guess one of the things that, since everybody is here, is what would folks like from a users group and users group meetings? Like what format should this take? We have the developer meetings, potentially meetings for certain issues, but for actually users, what is the best format for us to use? Go ahead.
I mean, in the beginning of any users group, the first thing you need to have available is some basic training material on how to. So, I mean, we call it a users group, but for something like this, it's really a little more than just a user, because at the very minimum, you may not be writing the code that most of us have been writing for this thing, but you will have to be doing the FPGA code itself, right? So, so there needs to be some sort of training around that. There's going.
And we're going to begin that today.
Okay. That's really, my only point. I mean, that user groups, they tend to generate questions and material over time as people run into issues and say, well, I have a cool idea, but I'm not sure how to do it. And you can talk it out, and you can have a FPGA problem of the month eventually.
So this is Ron. Being a new user, one of the things I'd like is, I'm looking at the agenda here too, and I like these things. I've got a piece of hardware in my hand. Thank you so much, Pete. It has sat here on my desk. I'm blowing the dust off of it now. So I need to be able to do more than that with it, and we're going to learn a little bit of that today, I hope. it would be good to have some place where I can ask questions, and there might be a community of people who can help answer dumb questions and not so dumb questions. So, like some people have .io groups for their project. Some people have a mailing list, a user's mailing list, for example. So, I would. You don't want to necessarily invest a whole bunch of time if it turns out there's going to be 4 users. But in case it does grow, you want to think about what format people would like. Personally, I like the IO groups, or a mailing list, I guess, is okay as well. I usually get the digest from those.
What is an IO group?
So IO is a website where it's a bulletin board. There we go. I'm looking around at the faces on the cameras here, and if I say bulletin board, you guys will all know what I'm talking about. If it was my daughter, she would think it had cork and was involved somewhere.
Cork in a bottle.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's basically a combination of a mailing list, but it's hosted someplace so you can go and you can do searches and so on, and ask your questions, and people in the community answer. It's got a section where you can drop code files. For example, images are supported, all that sort of jazz, and they're free.
So, excuse me, would it be a matter of getting an account on the .io and adding a section for this, or how is that what you were
I've never
implying?
set one up. I've never set one up, but if you guys are interested in that, there are IO boards for Raspberry Pi ham radio. There's just a ton of them. If you go
Could
to
you put a link to
groups.io,
one in the chat? Just put a link to any of those boards in the chat so we can get a quick look at what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And you guys don't have to answer today, but if you want me to do that, somebody give me the word and I'll go figure out how that's done.
Well, I think, as you said, right now, in a sense, we're just getting started with the user dimension, and Jamie invited someone to attend, but he chose not to. But we almost had one user. We almost had one person who was from outside the dev group. But yeah, that's an interesting possibility.
Now you have to sign up for them, so you have to create an account on that website. If you do, you can join. I'll give you a link to the one a ham radio one, for example. I'll go figure out which ones I'm signed up for, but I don't think you'll see much unless you have an account.
So what type of functionality do you get here?
So you can post messages, and those are rich text, so you can drop pictures. They have a space for you to put a calendar. They've got it keeps track of topics, so it's threaded. There's a feed available, so if you want to push information out to people, there is an archive where people can drop files in different folders, so that if people want to go find and pick up files. The ones I've got right now is Raspberry Pi for ham radio, Radio Artisan, FT991A is my radio, so there's one particular for the radio. And KM4ACK, KMAC makes a ham radio stack for Raspberry Pi for controlling your ham radio, and it's anyhow he's got a group there too. So that's the ones I've got so far.
Great. The thing that I would like to see in user group meetings are demos. People demonstrating different things, and as we go along, we will naturally be doing part of that as a side effect of the dev work. But eventually, I would expect to see demos that would attract attention, attract people's interest and help people. It would be another dimension to the instructional angle. Because it wouldn't just be looking at the one of the FPGA data sheets, which would probably drive you around the bend after a short period of time, but it would attach something of interest to the details of how it works. Anything else? So back to you, Dawn.
Okay. I'm wondering, would people find regularly scheduled meetings useful, a monthly meeting, or is everybody so meetinged? Is everyone's calendar so full that that's not a useful thing?
Yeah, mine's getting full.
I kind of like the idea of a monthly meeting, not a weekly, but a monthly or a quarterly, something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say I couldn't make more than one a month.
And again, it depends on what content is being provided and whether we have to prepare stuff for it. And
Right. How much does it take to prepare for it? I mean, right, this is the user group meeting, not the development meeting. Sorry, I probably had that mixed up in my head.
Yeah, so we don't really have, other than the one who maybe, we only have possibly the one user other than ourselves. So, planning any kind of regular meeting at this time, I think would be a little bit, I don't think we need to do that.
Well, what I was thinking is if I were going to invite someone, being able to say there's a quarterly meeting and tell them when it was would be the best way I could go about getting somebody interested, right? And showing up, having something even if it isn't very frequent, if they know that it's like, then they'd be interested. They might ask, what else? Where can I ask questions? And having something they can aim for.
Yeah, no, I understand the concept of having a regular meeting. That's actually quite good. However, I'm wondering, so, I don't know. I just think we're at such a beginning stage of this. I'm not sure what we can, how best to do that. That's all.
Let me suggest the notion that we actually would have things to jump into right away. If for those that can see the agenda, Dawn's about to, she's going to be talking about goals, possibly, proposed goals for the group. And, it's another dimension that hasn't been mentioned, but it's kind of group projects, the users ganging together and making a large problem into smaller problems, or simplifying documentation and things like that for the good of future users. And Dawn can take it from, can comment further on that. But did anybody else have a remark?
Well, there is, at the very beginning, I proposed a project which was to make a neuromuscular interface for a servo motor, which uses everything that that is on the system. And I would like to, possibly propose that as a group project. That the way that I do my design is maybe not the right word, but the way that I evolve things is by looking at what the need is. And so, and it's good from a community organizing point of view to have a success. So to get together and, bi-monthly seems to be a good compromise, but to get together and design something that we can strap a 7-year-old in and have them move a servo motor and eventually a robot around just by twitching their arm. And eventually, I would like to do it by pure brainwave. And I've got systems to do that. That would be, hell, that would be fun. I don't know, that's my idea of fun. For a community project, somebody takes the analog design, somebody takes the digital design, somebody takes a little servo motor and attach it to the ESP and makes it go back and forth. That seems like a worthy and newsworthy thing to make happen. And that's an actual, it's not a theoretical abstraction. It's getting something that a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 70-year-old can play with.
All right, it's interesting. It seems. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Ron, I'll put it in my wizard's wand so that I can make it flare up at will.
Mm-hmm. I have a little game that you can actually triggers off the brainwave, sort of brainwave, and you can move a little ping pong ball around. It's setting up there. It to be able to do something like that would attract attention. Probably attract something on the evening news. It's a very clear demonstration. The FPGA dialogue ESP32 is a tremendous abstraction from things. To be able to have a robot, maybe somebody in a wheelchair. I don't know in a wheelchair, but maybe somebody in a wheelchair being able to move a robot around. There's somebody in the TriEmbed group who has a robot that they are sending around to look at things. To be able to control that robot from eventually brainwaves would, I think, get a lot of attention, and it would, in my opinion, be fun.
So one idea might be to take our regular meeting schedule and have one of those nights, like once a month, be a user group meeting. And then the other two things we had been using meetings for was the development group and then administrative, essentially, whatever word we were using for that. And so maybe just reorganizing that meeting time so that one of them per month is a user meeting. That's a thought.
So we've only been meeting once a month as a group, right? Which means that you mean like 1 month out of a quarter or something as a users group, or are you proposing that there be more than one meeting a month?
So we were, well, it's been evolving, but the current schedule, I think, was every second week, but only every second week was in person.
Oh, did we take over TriEmbed then? No, okay. No. Oh, I must have missed something. I'm sorry. I know I've been out of the loop. You guys just tell me.
Well, Rob, if you just look back at recent history, we have been getting together face to face on average once a month, and in between those, we've been coming up with one reason or another to have virtual meetings.
Okay.
And so we actually have been averaging more than one meeting a month.
Okay. Yeah, I just missed it. Sorry.
Months. Yeah.
I think the function of the development meeting is to get other people, Dawn, Jamie, other people, so they can run things on the platform. We are getting close to that point with the install script. Now I think the next phase is to do something with those tools that we have put together. and attract other people into that. So it's a the development group, presuming we can do stable installations, we can now attract other people in and saying, this is what we're playing with. So that's there. The hopefully the development stuff and the install stuff is progressing so that there is an end in sight.
It seems to me with a users group, there are two kinds of things I'm used to when I'm part of a users group. Sometimes there are projects, like the humanoid robot project was a project, right? There was a direction and a purpose, and people got together and worked on it. And what Nick just described would be a project. And when you show up, you're expecting to contribute to that project. Sort of like when you show up for the development team, you're expecting to help get this development going, right? And then there are users groups, and we may not have the user base for it now, but where people show up sort of like regular TriEmbed with whatever they're doing, right? TriEmbed is much broader because it's just robotics and embedded, but the idea is an Arduino users group, people often show up with whatever Arduino thing they wanted to do, not to work together towards a common goal. And it's kind of interesting to think about. In the beginning, we probably need projects because there are no users, right? Until we get it out there enough, there simply are no users. Once we get it documented and out there, if we can get a few projects going, there'll be people interested in that. And I guess part of it is to be intentional over time. When do we convert from a project group to a users group? Because it feels very different to be in one than the other. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, I would argue that even though it's oriented towards a project, it's still it's usage versus development, right?
Sure,
it's
sure, absolutely.
Hands-on, and also one area where we are all at various stages of the beginnings. Some very, very, very beginning, and some with a slight bit of experience, and that's using the synthesis tool. So using the GoConfigure tool is actually something where we're going to need help. Various people are going to need help learning how to use that thing, and that actually I think is probably going to end up being the initial project, whether we want it to or not, because okay, that was Nick, because it's the synthesis tool is, even though it's very, very straightforward with drag and drop interface and so on, the underlying building blocks that are being interconnected and so on have a lot of complex parameters and characteristics, and the way you compose them with the GoConfigure tool is involved. And I'm kind of jumping the gun here. Dawn can kind of pick this up, but
no,
actually,
carry on.
Goal 1. Oh, okay. Well, actually, I don't see it anymore. I thought that one of the project's proposed things was to go through, work with the GoConfigure documentation and get to know it, how to use it, and so on, and perhaps make cheat sheets and ways to make it easier to use, especially with these complex GUIs. It's often extremely useful to show you the 7 commands or 7 functions that you need to use, and you can ignore the other 930 functions because you can do a lot of stuff with the 7, and then you get your confidence up, and you go to 8, 9, and 10, and so on. But I see that as kind of an inevitable piece of this if we are in fact intending to learn how to use these FPGAs. But why don't we talk about the goals that Dawn defined that she can go over?
There, I guess we sort of have broadly one. So let me see here. So Now I'm going to try sharing my screen, but for some reason it didn't seem to like my doing this. So
That looks good.
can you see that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. In my view, it's only in my little window, not okay. All right, good.
That's an artifact of how Jitsi is presenting the views to you.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So one thing, or a draft of this user group, the first goal is to get ourselves to the point where we can change the blink rate on the ESP32 FPGA project boards. Some tools are aardvark, which most of us probably, several of us, I guess, have gotten to work. Getting to learn or use the GoConfigure software. As Nick pointed out the last meeting, actually learning how to use the ESP32, because there's a lot in that can be done there, especially in the later stages of the Quercus project development, or once those are accomplished. Pete had mentioned a debugger, and then, sorry, the indentation of this got messed up, but and along the way, document our steps to make it easy for future members to get up to speed. And this was where that quick start guide for the GoConfigure tool it got lumped in. And then as we go along, curate some external resources that other people can point or look at. And this might come into play if we have some kind of a bulletin board, such as Ron suggested, where we can put other resources that people can look at to use these tools. Anyway, so the main thing is to get to the point where we can actually understand, blink the LED, understand it, change it, substitute a row of LEDs or whatever. And so if we get to it today, starting with that, number 4 is actually diving in and working with GoConfigure and starting to see what it does.
So have we covered this area enough? Shall we go on to the next part?
I think so, other than, do we want to reach a decision tonight or continue it in alpha test group as to whether we want to have one user group meeting per month, one development meeting per month, and maybe admin meetings as needed? Do we have a consensus on what we want to do as far as meetings are concerned, or should we just leave that open for now?
I think that the face-to-face meetings at the Forge are very valuable, and we should for sure continue those. And if the Forge can accommodate us, I think those being once a month,
Right. So
that would be a worthwhile goal.
We're working really hard at that. Our Linda and Fiona are working out schedules like tonight as we speak. The night that's available is Wednesday night, which I think is the night we meet, so that works out pretty well. At most, there will be one Wednesday a month that we could put towards this, but we can probably do that. I've been working really hard to make sure they keep that open for us. So I'll communicate in that we'd really like that, and but I will need to figure out which Wednesday it is and go ahead and grab that, because they're getting booked to where there are no times that aren't filled right now as the season starts up. But we've still got our handles on Wednesday for now.
I'm writing the code because I want to use it, which makes me one of the members of the user group, I guess. If it's in a month's time, I can probably bring by 3 or 4 different things that are using various versions of the Ant, and so I can actually to go back to the thing that Rob was talking about, one thing that users groups do is to show what they're doing. Well, I can probably show some things that I'm doing.
Cool.
To clarify, it was actually the face-to-face development meetings that I was actually referring to, rather than the user group meetings. And that was kind of, I mean, we're trying to reach, well, we're trying to converge on what to do about user group meetings. So I thought, well, in the meantime, let's agree on the.
Well, let's grab the Wednesday night, right? Let's grab the Wednesday night.
Let's grab the Wednesday night, and it can be chartered. You know, it doesn't have to have it doesn't have to have a cast in stone agenda. So,
right. We can figure out what the most valuable use of it is.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, you know, following up on Nick's remarks, it may turn out to be that, you know, that's really the most effective way to do it, and we can do the development side, leveraging both Signal and people jumping on and off Jitsi. So
that's one Wednesday a month, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if I mean, Don mentioned admin, but, you know, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to, I mean, we don't all have to attend all of the meetings, right? So we can eventually get to the point where you know, when there are more frequent meetings, they don't necessarily have to involve everybody every time. But I think at least some definition of a regular periodic meeting related to user, you know, it's oriented towards users. As I said, it seems to me like we've got plenty to do to do with using. You know, I mean, we each need to do a fair amount of learning in various areas to actually use this thing. But it's also, I would point out that it's completely valid for people involved with this stuff to have no interest in the using side of things, and only be interested in development, or vice versa, or some third aspect or something. You know, it's seems like there's room for flexibility, but I would propose that we have, as Rob mentioned, we take advantage of the reservation that he can hold, and for face-to-face, and then it seems reasonable to expect a periodic meeting, second meeting at least, that could be virtual, and the kind of the divisions between what's development or what's user group oriented, it can be driven by how things progress. So I'm proposing at least one meeting a month for each family. So that comes out to be some sort of thing every 2 weeks, but they don't have to be quite as orchestrated as tonight's meeting. So everybody hates that idea, huh?
No, I think it kind of makes sense, actually.
That's why people hate it.
Well, if there are no objections, let's try that.
Okay.
And you know, one face-to-face, one virtual, and we may find that, you know, sometimes we can hold to those. Sometimes we have to deviate a little bit. But let's go with that. So shall we go to item number 3 on the agenda? Or,
Yes.
or is there more to discuss?
Nope, I'm done.
Okay. So I put together some slides. So basically, this is a collection of pictures, screenshots, and it's going to go step by step through the current process that you follow to get Quercus running, and also the running of it. So we can go down to the first slide. And this is a bash shell session. And if you look at the top line, that is, if you look to the left, we're in the Quercus, well, my local fork of the Quercus repo in the tools and Linux subdirectory where the installer currently lives. And the command line invokes the installer script with 4 arguments. The first is the SSID of your local Wi-Fi network that the ESP32 and the aardvark browser session are going to communicate with. And the second, of course, is your Wi-Fi password. And then there's an argument target device that allows you to specify the different flavors of ESP32 board that you're going to use. And then when you start that command, you start seeing this output, and it's as terse as possible. So there are bazillions of lines that come out when you do this without redirecting standard out, standard error. So the basic strategy is to redirect that verbose output and only show it to you if something goes wrong. So what ordinarily comes out are these little kind of progress messages to say what's been happening. Oh, well, actually, it starts off with a summary based on your command line arguments and various version numbers and I2C pin numbers and so on. And then it starts putting out lines as the install process progresses. And if we go down to the next slide, this is the tail end of it. And the last thing it does is it says installation complete. And then the rest of it is a bunch of informational lines that come out that describe the kludge that we have to currently use, because we don't have an effective means of communicating certain details over to aardvark land, and that this kludge will be going away. And Nick's going to be talking about various things next. And so the instructions basically tell you that, if you want to use the ESP IDF in a general fashion, how to arrange that, and then it gives you instructions for what to do next. And notice that it shows you an example output line with an IP address 192.168, etc. That's relevant to the next steps. So anyway, if we keep scrolling down, the next thing that you do is switch directories to the local copy of the ant piece of the repository that's been set up in the directory called q_ant. And then you and that causes the next few lines are output by this magical dir env feature that's very clever. It detects the fact that you've made this directory your current directory, and it automatically runs a script that sets up the access to the ESP32 tool chain. And then the next, the bottom line is an invocation of one of the ESP32, ESP IDF framework commands, and this particular command tells the toolchain to flash the program image that lives in q_ant/build into the ESP32, and it automatically knows we've communicated what kind of ESP32 we have. So all of the details for how that flashing has to happen has all been set up behind the scenes. And then the next thing after flashing, we're telling it to monitor the output of the ESP32. And so that causes a bunch of lines to come out with the progress for the flashing, and then it starts putting out lines from the ANT firmware executing in the ESP32. And the tail end of that is shown on this line, on this slide, and direct your attention to the line. Oh, there it is. I don't know why it's the very last line there. That's interesting. But anyway, the very last line of the output is the station IP address. And what you have to do currently is simply put that into your clipboard, copy it into your clipboard. And then you break out of the monitor session with control right square bracket, which was part of the instructions that came out in the previous step. You then change directories into a sibling of q_ant called q_aardvark, which is again a copy out of the repo. And the reason we're copying it out is to keep you from polluting your repo and losing confidence in the integrity of that directory and stuff, but also mainly because you will eventually be wanting to have lots of these targets containing different applications, for example, or applications that have different forms of tweaks to them. And once you're in this aardvark directory, you have to edit one of the source files. The vi space src / blah blah is the vi editor command for doing that. So if we go to the next slide, we see what this file looks like when you bring the editor up. And if we go to the next slide, oh, I'm sorry, go back, sorry. This is actually the point in the editor that the instructions tell you to go, except it's off by about 9, it's off by a small number of lines. It says line 56, and it's actually, as you can see, line 63. The thing on the bottom says line 63 of 156. Well, this is the line that's got that same IP sort of address in it. And what you have to do is go replace the blah blah 217 line with what's in your clipboard. Then you save that edit. And of course, you could use Kate or any one of a number of your favorite editor to do this. And so once you've kludged that IP address in, we go to the next slide, and you're still in the aardvark directory, and you use these mystical npm commands to build the Node.js application that is the server code that is going to pretend to be a web browser, and then you run it. You start the server application.
What do you mean pretend to be a web browser? It is a web browser.
It is. I shouldn't have said pretends, because everybody knows Apache is a real web browser. I mean, a web server. It's a web server. Yeah, it's a full class web server. Super powerful. If we go to the next slide, it shows what happens when you do those commands. It ends up saying, okay, it's the server, the app is running. It puts out various errors, which you can safely ignore. This is one of the very few things that environments you'll ever be in, in my experience, where you get fatal errors in red and you can just keep right on going. So this is a feature to do with this flavor of application. So if we go look down now, so we see it's running, and it shows you the address it's running at, the local URL. And so now if we scroll down, we're going to point our favorite web browser to that address. You'll see it in the URL text box. And this is the aardvark initial web page that comes up. So now we're looking at the web page that's being served by the aardvark program running in the browser.
By the way, that error is bogus. It's not a true error. If
that's fine.
A semicolon in a CSS script within HTML in the middle of a line is perfectly legal.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, functionally speaking, it's not an error because we see the program is actually starting up and running.
There's no other way to do it anyway.
I appreciate that detail. So now we've got aardvark running, and direct your attention to the 3 parallel lines to the left of aardvark. That's the main menu. You left click that to drop down the menu, and within that menu is a little downward pointing triangle, and when you click that, you get the menu that we're looking at. So the 3 horizontal lines drop down a menu, one piece of which is a submenu, and so this is that submenu. And because we're impatient, we're not going to do any of these other commands. I can describe what they do real quickly. But we're just going to jump right down there to test. But item list provides a bunch of information that's of interest to Nick. I2C scan tells the ANT firmware in the ESP32 to interrogate the FPGA and report back what addresses are detected. I2C read tells ANT to read the contents of the FPGA, the magic 2048 bits, and feed them back to aardvark. And I2C read does something I've forgotten, but we can cover that in a minute. Status provides some kind of status that I've forgotten. But we're going to do test, which is to say, I want to test my FPGA code. So if we go to the next screen, we've clicked on the test button. And here's the output. It shows a dump of the 2048 bits, I believe. And you'll notice the browse button that says browse ... This is how you browse for an FPGA application file, the thing that's created by GoConfigure. And so if we click on that, it causes the screen that's on the next slide to appear, which gives us a file chooser interface. And it's very smart about caching the path name, your local path name, to your collection of application files. So you pretty much only have to find that path once. And I can honestly say I've not had to search for that directory path just since I started doing this stuff. It's fantastic. So anyway, we select blinky.app, and then we hit the open button in the lower right corner, and it updates, and you'll notice now on the next slide, it to the right of browse ... is blinky.app. So it's showing you the app, and oddly enough, it's my belief that the hex dump reflects the bits, and it goes ahead because it knows that you're enthusiastic, and it the ESP32 has gotten the bits from aardvark out of the file, from the file, and it's programmed the FPGA, and the FPGA immediately starts running. And so you start seeing blinky blink, and it's, I think, 4 times a second. each of you should be able to reproduce this. With the current code, it seems quite stable, and you should be able to go through these steps and reproduce these results. And if you can't, lean on me. Unfortunately, I'm going out of town tomorrow, but I'll be back by Monday. I tend to stay connected to Signal pretty well. And if you run into a problem, give me a ping. You can also lean on Nick. This is the way the system works now. I ran out. I literally don't have USB connections to plug my board in at the moment because of yet a different snafu with my workstation. Or I could point the camera at the green LED blinking, but you guys have seen blinks. So that's the run through of the way things go right now. Any questions?
Actually, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead, Carl.
I have one question. Does the ESP32 recognize a 5G network or not?
5G is a cellular protocol.
No, I'm not talking about that. So
I believe it does.
Oh, 5 gigabits per second.
Yeah, 5
I'm
gigabits
sorry.
per second.
5G is overloaded.
2.4 or 5, right?
Yep.
I personally, I'm pretty sure it only runs at 2.4 gig, but
Well,
I might
and
be
I'm
wrong.
thinking the same thing because I set mine up for a 5G and it didn't seem to work. So I wasn't sure if it was me or that's
Nick can chime in about more recent ESP32 boards, but the ones that I've dealt with only advertise 2.4.
Yeah, I'm working on a different ESP board, so I could well be wrong. I've got a an S2 board, which is just convenient for me to work with. So I'm not entirely sure.
The one clue is that the antenna, if you look closely at the antenna, which is the end of the printed circuit board, it's the end on the opposite end from the USB connector. If you look closely, you'll see there's a little zigzag of a PC board trace, and that is actually the antenna, and it is a quarter wave antenna that's tuned. It's got loading. It's got all kinds of trade-offs to make it fit on the board, but it's tuned for a specific frequency band. To support 5, there would have to be a second antenna.
Yeah, so I assume a half wave or a full wave antenna is going to give you a lot more range.
Oh yeah, you can get ESP32s with external antenna connectors, and
yeah, I know.
Some of them do support dipoles, I believe. Although I might be wrong. No, they might only. I think they're probably not balanced. No, they're unbalanced. So they're designed for unbalanced antennas, either like quarter wave or 5/8 wave unbalanced antenna.
I can get over 100 feet if I goose the power on the ESP.
And by the way, with enough adapters, you can take those little antenna connectors and connect them up to like a 28 dBi dish antenna, and get it high enough to be able to view another dish antenna, and you'll go a long way.
Yeah,
very long way.
This is ESP32 with an external antenna on it. It's the one with the camera.
So is that a dipole antenna or oh no, it's just the black thing. It's between your fingers.
Thing. I'm not sure. I think it's just I don't know what it is inside.
Let me turn off my screen sharing here. Or no, it's Dawn's. Dawn, if you'll turn off this, yeah, that we can see it.
You can? Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, let me pull it back a little bit so it's in focus better. But yeah,
that looks like a 5/8 wave, possibly quarter wave.
Yeah, so there is an antenna on the ESP32. It's in this section here, but there's a little resistor you have to flip. Actually, it's not. It's a 0 ohm resistor. Technically, you can use a piece of wire, but it's on the bottom side. And you have to move it from one position to the other to be able to use the external.
Right. That's very good. That's flexible for it to support both options. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and this is fairly cheap. It's like $6 for that thing with the camera and everything. Doesn't come with the antenna though.
Okay.
That I had.
In the interest of time, I suggest that we hand things over to Nick to talk about the future, the changes that are in the works, starting with say the value of the MDNS feature and also the EEPROM. And I don't think we're not going to get to actually run the GoConfigure tool tonight, but I think that this was time well spent the way we did it. So over to you, Nick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's unaccustomed to public speaking as I am. I have been reasonably scrupulous about not changing the version of the code that is out there. There will be very, very soon a version that has the MDMS, which means you don't have to know the device name. There is in the code that Pete showed, there is the ability to write both to the RAM and to the EEPROM on the ESP. It's just not clearly done. Those are the changes I'm going to make in the current version, which I've cleaned up a whole bunch and I will put out there.
Excuse me. Yeah, let me just interject for Ron's benefit. The distinction between the RAM and the EEPROM inside the FPGA is that some of these devices are only one-time programmable. And so you can put the program in, you can put the bits in RAM and play with the FPGA until you really, really get the thing sorted out. Then you can put the bits in the EEPROM, and that will permanently program the device so that when it powers up, it automatically runs the thing. Anyway, back to you, Nick.
Okay. Well, it is the extension that I these are the versions that will go out there. The extension that I have on my version, which is different, basically lets you write in something that looks like a text file on your in the web interface, which is actually loaded to the ESP and runs when the ESP is booted. So what that means is that you can always run from RAM, but you can have multiple configurations that run because there can be more than one of these files, and you can always get back to the base, a functioning version of it. That is one of the things I did was to take one of my pressure sensors and actually write a JavaScript program which scooted out, did all the initialization, and returned pressure data to a website. And this was all written as a JavaScript program in user space rather than in it's so you can take a brand new device and do everything you need on the web interface. And that's so that is actually functioning at the moment, but not it won't be in this coming release. It also has over-the-air flashing, so that the what happens is the device comes up. If it does not find a wireless hub it knows about, it goes into the console mode and lists the hubs that it does know about, asks you to select one. When you select it, it connects to that. When you select one, put in your password, it allows you to select directly to that. So it sort of has this as a fallback mode. So pretty much all of the configuration can be done dynamically. If you take the device to Poughkeepsie, then it can't connect. It won't be able to connect to your specified home router. It will make a couple of feeble attempts, and then it will say, you know, these are the wireless devices I know about. Which one do you want me to connect to? A very similar thing goes on with the I2C connectors. If it cannot find the ESP device, because the ESP device can be at a number of addresses, then it gives you the option, essentially at a what looks like a command line connected through the USB cable, to go in and basically reconfigure the device. My aim is to be able to essentially take a device, ESP or SPI, or that I have never seen before, and be able to initialize it and programming it entirely through JavaScript, entirely through the web interface, with never having to do any C code, never having to do any of that. And I'm moderately close to that. In the case of the dialog chip, the program that loads to the dialog chip can be saved in ESP memory and loaded at runtime. So you can have multiple configurations. You can change them. You can change them dynamically. There's plenty of space. I have been very stingy with the ESP memory, so there's plenty of space to put out multiple programs on the board, so you can share them. You can have a temperature sensor and switch over to another device and another program, and reconfigure the dialog chip to be something entirely different. You can do all of this from the web interface. So you've got a very, very mobile environment. That's where I'm trying to head. So the ESP code is minimal, but it has basically a little language in there that allows you to load things, change things. That language interacts with the web interface and lets you basically lets you change things. You can specify I/O pins. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. So that is what I'm getting towards, and I'm going towards that as much because I want this to be able. I want to be able to do some of the projects that I want to do in this environment, and I've got things that are beginning to work in that. I probably at the next meeting will be demonstrating a position sensor that uses the environment. So
the next TriEmbed meeting, right?
The TriEmbed meeting, yeah. So I have very grandiose ideas, all done on a beer budget. But it is. I am driven by the projects. I envision what I want to use this for, and then I try and put the stuff together, the code together, to make that as simple as possible. And these meetings and these discussions are important to me because they give me feedback in terms of what other people might want to do with the device, and that makes it a hell of a lot more versatile. So that's sort of an overview of where I'm trying to get to. It's somewhat ambitious, but hell, it's so, you know, the more feedback you can provide to me, the more you can kind of slap me around in terms of the architecture. I may push back, but I'm that's what I'm trying to get to. Is a, you know, you basically can go to a website, download a module dynamically, which has, you click on the website, it looks to you like a web page, and it will then go out, flash the ESP, and turn the dialog chip into whatever is out there for a program. So you have a very nice, simple interface for being able to exchange programs, and you never have to delve down into the C code or the Node.js or any of the complexity. So that's where I'm trying to get to. Now, please ask me questions. Tell me I'm stupid.
We wouldn't dare.
Oh, it's dare. Go ahead. I can handle it. I've been told I'm stupid by more than this group.
No,
So
I think that sounds pretty good.
I heard. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
It's all right, Pete. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounded like you suggested there's an interpreter in the in Ant in the future.
There is one in my version of Ant right now.
Yes, and is this the interpret JSON as if it was Lisp scheme?
Yeah, that's because I'm ancient and I spent time on Lisp machines. So there's a similarity between a JSON string and a Lisp program. So I am using sort of a hybrid syntax so that the string that does the programming looks to the world like a JSON string, acts like a Lisp program. But
you
nobody
like parentheses, huh?
Pardon?
You like parentheses. Lisp's got billions of them.
Yeah, well, I used to write IC routers in Lisp, so yeah, they're you know,
and they talk with a lisp.
Yeah, they do, and you know, no, it is the JSON. I'm using the JSON string format, which I think is familiar to everyone. You know, they're curly brackets. They're not parentheses.
JSON object notation. Yes.
Yes. And so everything is goes through the JSON, but it's actually, you know, a Lisp-ish language. And that's because I happen to know Lisp. My apologies, but it looks like a JSON string, and there are plenty of tools out there that let you write JSON strings, edit them. You never have to be aware that you are talking in a language that was written in 1956.
Yeah. So it's hidden. It's one of those other things that you don't have to delve into unless
it's I'm not going to tell
totally
everyone I'm doing church calculus. It's no bad. It's a JSON string. That's all you have to know.
Yeah. Great.
So that's where I'm headed. And I've talked very briefly to Jamie. I want to. I've got a couple projects that I am implementing in this architecture that I'm bumbling through. I want to get other people using the architecture and telling me that I'm wrong. I learn far more by my mistakes than I do by being right. I've made plenty of them.
That's what Buckminster Fuller always said that.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's getting it right is that I learned nothing from that. So that's sort of the architecture that I'm playing with. I don't know how much sense that makes to everyone, but I'm trying to, yeah, it's a list, it's a JSONs, it's a, the programs are long JSON strings.
Very good. Well, so everybody's invited to when you start having exposure to these things, ask Nick why he did it that way, and wouldn't it be better if he did it a different way, or
Please do.
How do you do this again, or things along those lines. I think we're at the 9 o'clock point